So here we are in the same scene, and the next guy I will cover is a little bit special, and by special you'll see what I mean. I will explain it in this lesson. So firstly I want to create some more something like a more interesting geometry for this. So I'll inner extrude this without this preserve groups guy, and extrude once more and scale them outside. So I have some sort of a irregular bumpy ball, okay, which will do nicely. And you can create a new material now. And that next special guy is a subsurface scattering shader, which is in fact a fancy name for translucency. And I will refer to it as a SSS from now on. Since this effect has something to do with light and translucency, it is best to be loaded in luminance channel, which of course doesn't stop you from experimenting with other channels, but the main usage is meant to be here under luminance. I will load it here as a effect. If I do a test render, you will see that something happened. Just scale this a bit so it doesn't consume so much render time. You see that our sphere kind of lit up. It has some sort of luminance to it, and if you enter this shader and increase the strength, let's say 10 times what we have now, you can enter that in numerical boxes in Cinema for this, so any mathematical operation, so times 10, you will get the exactly 10 times higher number. So you can see actually that this strength is too much less. Try something like 150, which is double, I presume. And here we go. So this strength value controls how pronounced the luminance of this absorption filter is. This next guy, this filter length, will do absolutely nothing if you have only single color here. And since this is a place where you can put many colors, so you get a gradient, then it will have effect. So this filter length will only work if you have 2 or more colors here. Otherwise you can completely forget about it. This SSS shader is really dependent on the size of your object, and that's why you cannot create few nice shaders and use them all over again. It simply won't work because a chance of that you will have two exactly the same sized objects is very small. And this SSS shader, which is a translucent effect, you can see the translucency effect in real life. For example, your skin is translucent, milk is translucent, almost any object has a small amount of translucency, so it can really give realism to your render. So let's cover it a bit more in depth. So as we said, the object's size really matters. So generally you will copy one of these values. So if you have different values, take the middle one from those three and enter it here under scattering length. So let's try that. Let's put 66 here centimeters and see what happens. You can tune down this strength to something like 100. So we have a really round, nice number, and you can actually see the light is coming from here and it's visible here, but deep down here in the end of the object it doesn't pass through. I will load a color here so you will see that effect more vividly. It's always good to use really saturated colors here. Let's give it a little bit of time to render, and you can actually see we get some sort of a washed out rubbery look. And you can control this amount of washing out with this absorption filter, which is not really technically correct, but you'll really get a good idea how does it work. So if you enter something really small here, like 5, then the object will be more dense, more opaque. I believe it's the word for it. And you can see that instantly. And on contrary, if you enter something really large here, like let's say 200, you will completely wash out that color and this shader will become really washed out. So let's take that 5, maybe even 10 value. So it's not so pronounced, not so saturated as we had before, and which leads us to our next guy, which is samples guy. If you look a bit closely, you will see it's a bit grainy. So when you will be increasing these samples, you will be increasing the overall quality of the surface. But in the testing stage, I suggest leaving this around 10 and boost it really later. If shader doesn't look right when you have, let's say, 100 samples here, then you are doing something wrong. So let's put 10 here, and this minimum thickness value is really designed to correct these really light up appearances that you can see here. It really doesn't look natural, so we'll say the minimum thickness for the light to pass through will be exactly this value. So let's try something like 5, see what we get. And you can see the overall shader change, but we have somewhat of more decent results. To ensure that you're really using correct settings when you have somewhat intersecting geometry, check this use normals guy. Just want to say that here under samples, more samples mean more render time. Sometimes that more render time can mean significantly more render time. I'm talking about hours. This currently looks like some sort of a rubbery ball, and maybe the strength is too big. You see, this is really saturated. So let's drop down the strength to something like 60 and see what we get. Just wait a second for it to render, and I can set this absorption to something like 5 to get a more opaque effect, so it will be more uniform. Maybe even something between 5 and 10, let's say like it. You see here, minimum change in values will produce dramatically different results. So there is no real recipe how to build these shaders. You will really have to dig in and understand the very nature of these settings. So now I think I would simply increase this sample. So let's say to something like 100, and I will disable the render. I'll start all over again so you can actually see how much time it will take for this to render with so many samples here. You can see my machine is going crazy since I'm already recording this, and I have an audio cleanup utility. Okay, here we go. It came back to its normal state. The surface is much better in terms of quality, and it's not so grainy anymore. So let me drop down this samples value back to something like, let's say 20, which is a reasonable value, and I can put this minimum thickness to 2 and see what happens. So beware, this shader requires a lot of tweaking to get desired results. Let me show you what happens if you put another color value here, for example something like maybe green, and this first chip will control the color where the light hits the object, and this will be the other end where the light doesn't come through. I really hope I haven't lost anyone, and we will cover our next guy. So let's cover our next guy here, which is a vertex map shader. At the first glance it doesn't look like much since it has only the slot for the vertex map and invert function. We'll just apply this material to this test sphere. So what can we actually do with this? To be able to create vertex maps in Cinema4D, you have to be in vertex mode, so this could also be named a point map. And here under character menu you have a paint tool which enables you to paint maps. So to really simplify this, you can paint which areas will be 100% influenced and which areas will be 0% influenced, but by whatever inside Cinema4D, and of course all the values in between. And let me show you, and it will be much more easier to understand. For example, I want to paint 100% value on this row of vertices, and I will put here strength 100%, and the mode here, set that to absolute, and it will do an absolutely 100% value while I paint. In the add mode, which was previous, it would add whatever value I have here, but just to make sure, I always use this absolute value to get this exact number. So let me paint this, and you will see exactly something changes. And now we have a yellow band in the red sphere, and we defined our vertex map, and we will use this vertex map to tell Cinema 4D which part of the object we want to have, for example, transparent or use as a texture. So let me show you. It will be much more easier to understand. So here under shader, we will drop in that vertex map and do a test render and see what we get. Okay, and we get this. We can do any invert function, so you will see what it does, and this doesn't look like much, but actually it will lead me to a next thing in this lesson. And for example, if you load this vertex map shader in the alpha channel, let me just disable the render for now and paste it here. And of course I will now clear this to some sort of a color, and let me render now, and you will see what happens. And actually now this area here is gone. You can see through it. It is completely transparent. So let me disable this soft, and you can currently see that now this area is completely visible and the rest of the sphere is invisible. If you do an invert function, we will get different results. So we painted our vertex map, and we said use that painted area to define visibility here in the alpha channel. So this is the most simple use of vertex map shader I could think of, and this leads me to something really nice and usable. Let me disable that, delete that material and the vertex map, and we'll create a new material, apply, and you can actually manually paint without worrying about these vertex maps in body paint, and use that as an alpha channel. So you could basically have a skin, then you could have an alpha channel texture that would say, for example, this area will be hollow, and under that you can utilize layer shader, which we will cover, which is absolutely great, to say, okay, I want to have blood vessels here and muscles and so on and so forth. So let's do a simple thing with alpha channel. Let's go here under body paint, and before we try to paint anything, we have to run through this wizard. So just want to select, I will select all and select only my sphere, and hit next here, and here under color value I will choose completely white, because I want the starting color to be completely opaque, so it will not be transparent. So let's paint something. Let's take a completely black color, which means completely transparent. Let's paint something like, okay, not this is very ugly, let me undo that. And select my brush tool here, and I'll increase this hardness value to 100% and maybe this size to something like maybe 32. And let me paint something like, let's say, V, P. And you can remember this is where texture meets, and that is our first problem. The projection is not good enough. But for now, let's use this. Let's go back to startup layout, and if we do a render now, just go to my object mode, you can actually see that this sphere has these two letters on it. But what we want to do, we want to copy that texture and put that information in alpha channel. So we will define where it is completely transparent. So paste, and I will clear it here. And now, I'm not sure if you actually can see this, but it is really completely transparent. I can just maybe select a sphere and cut off this part, so you will see exactly through it, something like this, and I will render, and you will be able to see that those letters are completely transparent. And now you can play with this invert function and get, for example, letters like this. This is a really simple demonstration. You can do amazing things with body paint. This kind of textures, you can stack them, you can layer them in any channel. You're really beginning to see how procedural materials are really powerful. And that's why I deliberately skipped this layer guy, which enables us to layer all these textures in millions if we want. Okay, so we will cover the layer shader next.